Chapter 5. Next day, I was frantic to check on my eggs. I'd been thinking of them all day in school, and all through supper too. It had been an entire day since I put them in the nest drawer, and I was worried. Were they warm enough? Were they too warm? Were they hatched yet? I had tried to check on them early that morning, but couldn't because everything turned suddenly crazy. I mean crazy. I had gone downstairs early, tiptoeing down, my shoes and jacket and books under my arm, knowing I had to be quiet not to wake Dad. Silently, I dropped my things on the couch, tiptoed for the back door. That's when I heard it, this yowl from behind me. I spun around and stared. This figure, this person, this man was rising up from the bundle of quilts and stuff on the couch, from where I had just dumped my shoes and school books. "Stop them! Stop them!" he was yelling. "What?" I yelled back. "What? Who are you?" I rubbed my hand over his face. "Ow!" he said. It was terrible. They were coming at me through the frozen food section. It was just terrible. Their lips were so blue." I backed up toward the door. He shook his head, blinked at me. "Oh," he said. He rubbed his hands over his face. "Oh, I'm David. You've got to be Amy. I gave you Silly Putty one Christmas. You ate it. You'd eat anything that wasn't nailed down." I just kept staring at him. "Right, Tom?" he said. "Didn't she?" I turned around. Dad had appeared in the doorway behind me, wrapped in his bathrobe, his hair all rumpled up. "Remember, Tom?" this person said. "She took a bite out of a slipper once. I remember, didn't she?" I turned to Dad. "Who is he?" I said. "What's he doing here?" "He's your uncle," Dad said. "He's David. He came to help me catch up with my work." "Right," David said. "Thomas makes me come here and be the beast of burden. I lug pig iron for Michelangelo here." That's when the bus honked, and Dad practically threw me out the door, yelling that I had to go to school. "That's where you belong every day, blah, blah, blah." Even though I kept shouting, "Wait!" he practically shoved me out the door, so I went. To the longest day ever. Now it was late afternoon, supper time, and I was home, and now there was another big delay. David, again. Dad and Susan had gone to a meeting about the marsh, leaving me with David person. But first, they had given directions about how to heat up dinner and what time I went to bed, like I needed a babysitter or something. Finally, though they were gone and David and I were settled down to dinner, all I could think about was how to sneak out to the barn. "Ah, David," I said, putting down my fork and pushing myself away from the table. "I'm finished. I have to—" "I really don't understand my brother," David interrupted me, like he didn't even hear me speaking. "Susan's good looking and she can cook. Did you know she made this stuff?" He held up his fork full of stew. I nodded. Susan could cook. I'd say that for her. Better than Dad, anyway. "She's good looking and she can cook," David went on. "Marry her, I say." "Is he going to marry her?" I said, alarmed. I didn't want that. I mean, Dad by himself was enough with super sweet Susan. "Nah," David said. "He's scared to. Hey, she's the first girlfriend he's had in years. It used to be such a drag coming here. Nothing worse than when you mooch off your brother and there aren't any women around." He wasn't looking at me as he talked, just bent over his plate, wolfing down his food like he hadn't eaten in a month. I looked over at the back door, at the flashlight on the chair there. David," I said, I have homework to do and—" "Is there more?" David said, holding out his plate. I just rolled my eyes, then snatched the plate from him and went to the stove. I ladled out a big thing of stew for him, brought it back. "Thanks," he said. "And she makes good money, too," Susan said. "Susan does. She's a farrier. Know what that is?" I didn't, and I didn't care. "Listen," I said again. "I have homework to do, and then maybe I'll take a walk or something." "It means she shoes horses," David went on, his head bent over his plate, stuffing in his food, talking with his mouth full. Mom would have murdered him for eating like that. "But not just any horse," he went on. "She's got a concession out at the track. Class hooves. We're talking some very healthy bucks." I got up, went to the sink. I'll do the dishes, I said. Hey, David said, maybe I should go for a dyeing skill too. You know, I got 2 degrees that didn't work. I have one in aerospace engineering and a BA in literature. Forget about it. No, your dad did it right. He followed his heart. He's always done that, from art to inventions to flying. Did he ever tell you how he started flying? I went back to the table, snatched his plate right out from under him. He was almost finished anyway, or he should be. Because of odd job, David said. That's why. Excuse me, I said. Odd job, David said. That was the name of an old goose used to be on our uncle's farm. I turned around. Dad liked geese, I said. David shrugged. Don't know, but he liked odd job. Odd job was hysterical. He'd have his wings clipped and couldn't fly, but he didn't seem to know that. He used to run down this big hill behind the barn like a 747 on takeoff. He'd run and run and run and somehow just clear the fence and get airborne, and then crash and burn in the pond. And then he'd shake himself off and do it again. David got up and went over and plopped himself in front of the TV. Funny, isn't it? He said. Thomas flies because of odd job. Who would have thought? He turned on the TV to a wrestling match, settled back in his chair, smiling. Wrestling, the dumbest, most boring sport anyone has ever watched. At least if he stayed absorbed in the wrestling, but he didn't stay absorbed, that is, which was just fine with me, because in about 2 minutes, I could see he was falling asleep. I could see his head nodding, then snapping back, and then nodding again. Probably because he was stuffed himself, or because wrestling was boring for him too. Whatever, but goody for me, because now I was free. I headed for the back door, picked up the flashlight. I took one last look at David, nodding on the chair. Waited another minute till I was sure he had gone bye-bye, then slipped outside and raced for the barn. Free, to see my eggs. In the barn, I laid the flashlight on the floor next to the dresser, then slowly, carefully slid open the drawer. The eggs had moved. That's the first thing I noticed. Not only had they moved, but they were moving even then as I watched. I could hear the scratching sound and pecking sound like they were trying to break their way out. They were. I stood breathless, afraid to move, afraid to make a sound, my eyes fixed on the eggs. The eggs jumped and wiggled, and then they began to crack. All of them were doing it. It was like they all had the same idea at the exact time. Break out of the shells. One after the other, the shells began rocking, breaking. And then I saw it. An eye, one big wide eye, looked at me. Ooh, I whispered. Oh, just look at you. I reached in carefully. I touched one, just one finger, on its little head. Look at you, I whispered. He began clucking or peeping or whatever he was doing, making little soft sounds. Then another egg cracked and another eye appeared, another gosling. The eyes continued to jump, move, crack. It took a long while, a very long while. The whole time I stood there staring, hardly daring to breathe. They had done it. They had hatched my eggs, my goslings. Soon all of them had done it, had cracked open. Their eggs were wobbling around.